All right, everyone, and welcome to the Nameless Nerds broadcast. I am Dak Crash, better known as Brandon, and this is Thinking Caveman, TC with you. It's a show that did not steal its name from the Untitled show about nerdy stuff and looking at you, Lasoyo. Today we'll be laying the groundwork for next week's big discussion about X-Men Apocalypse, but with an overview of the prior X-Men movies with yours truly, Thinking Caveman. And as always, you can keep up with my shenanigans on YouTube at Deckrash, Deckrash. And if you're a nerd like me and like nerdy books, well, I got them. Just follow my Facebook group, author Brandon Hill, or one of my two DeviantArt pages, Brandon Hill or Wild Space Saga, where yours truly and my partner in crime, Terrence Pegasus, share updates, comic art, concept art, and stories related to our webcomic of the same name. So hit up that DA page for all the info you need. Now, the X-Men movies have a long and, shall we say, colorful history since the first one debuted in 2000. It's that long ago. It's 16 years. Good Lord. And that's what we'll be discussing today, from the first to the next to last, which is Days of Future Past. The franchise has seen its share of peaks and pitfalls, and has changed the directorial hands multiple times, and has been met with a plethora of critique and commentary by critics and fans alike. So I'm going to kick this off with the first movie, which I loved. The first X-Men movie, the one that started it off. I mean, it was just a hit in the right direction. First of all, above everything else, with Patrick Stewart being chosen as Professor X. I remember back in high school, and this was now I'm dating myself. This was like back in maybe 1994 maybe. And I remember we had Wizard magazines. And Wizard magazines had often had what was a section called a casting call. And for those of you who don't remember Wizard magazines, they were a comic book magazine, kept up with comic book news, and even had like a pricing guide in the back. It was very, very helpful little thing. Really colorful magazine, really well done little thing. So what they had it was always a section in every issue called casting call, saying like, well, what if they made this comic book into a live action movie? Who would make the who would make the who would we want? You know, what stars do we currently know who would work out really well as such a person? And of course, with X-Men, the one that stood out and the one I remembered, everybody remember, said Patrick Stewart. Who else would play Professor X? And he did for that movie. Now, like I said, that's a standout point for that. But there's so much more to love about the first X-Men. It had it did a lot with such a large cast. Now, it wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, because even with such a large cast, some characters were left sort of wanting. You know, they shifted the lion's share of the focus on Wolverine, which of course, well, that worked to the film's advantage, as Wolverine was, of course, was and still is a fan favorite, and Hugh Jackman, was just double stroke of luck that Hugh Jackman played Wolverine.
Wait! Stop talking. You're just la. Stop. You want to talk about the X-Men movies and you want to jump straight to the first movie? What are you doing?
Well, of course I want to jump straight to the first movie. What better place to start than at the beginning?
That's not where the story begins.
If you're talking about what the production history of it, that's a totally different
thing. The X-Men story begins in 1963.
If you're talking, yes, but I'm not talking about the comic books. We're talking about the movies.
But you can't talk about the first movie without talking about the comic book.
Well, that would be a much longer preamble.
No, it wouldn't. If you shut up and let somebody else talk, it wouldn't be. Think about it. How can you have an X-Men movie without free material for it? Now, I will admit that the X-Men comic book #1 was a little bit thin on story and a host of other things, but it set the groundwork for everything that came after it. Wouldn't you kind of agree?
If you're talking about, well, of course the comics are going to set the groundwork. Without the comics, it wouldn't be a movie.
Well, yeah, there would. Somebody would have came. Oh, that's right. Hollywood doesn't do anything original, but that's another show and another conversation. Let's be more directed about what we're really talking about here. The story that is the first movie is disjointed and doesn't make sense to a true comic book reader of the story. And they don't even make an attempt to reference Giant Size Number One.
Wait a minute, wait a minute. You're talking about the comics or the movie now. Now you got me confused.
Think about it. In the comics, they play homage to how they found everyone and we're in this wonderful school together. And unless you read the comic book, you have no idea why everyone is there other than what you're told in the movie. And it really doesn't make any sense to an avid comic book reader to really enjoy it because it's really not following any of the stated story tropes. Skip the story tropes, not even focusing in on any of the story that any reader of the comic book is familiar with.
Wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. Hold on now. You hold on. When you're taking a movie adaptation of a comic, you're going to have two types of viewers. Ones who are completely new to the whole concept and the genre and the story, and others who are fans of the comic, who know who these people are, their histories, everything like that. And this is one thing I've learned when it comes to people who are fans of the comic or whatever, for whatever comic book based movie you find yourself in, is that the people who are going to who are fans of the comic are going to not so much tear the movie apart, but they're going to nitpick it to death at the very least.
But I mean, just the story alone here. Let's get to what I mean and not what I'm saying. That'll be a little easier. Okay. You have the basic characters, which is Hank, Jean Grey, Scott Summers. You get a little introduction to
Iceman
Warren.
and Angel too.
Yeah, you get a little introduction to Warren, but they make Bobby, the Iceman, a central figure, and as well as Rogue. Both characters come along later in the story in different ways, even though Iceman's in the original story. So to pair him up with Rogue kind of doesn't match for us old timers. But
that's what I'm trying to say is that you are coming at this from a fan of the comics from the very beginning. We're talking about the 1960s. X-Men. Now, this is where a little something called not literary. What's the word I'm looking for? Creative license comes in.
But even with the creative license, hang on. Listen to the adults in the conversation.
That's fighting words, but all right.
Even with creative licensing, you still get this whack-off version of the X-Men story that doesn't introduce anything. They intentionally avoid explaining Storm's origin to you.
They introduced Rogue's origin. They introduced Wolverine's origin.
Storm's origin?
No, Storm's origin didn't really come about. She didn't really have a clear origin story until you got to X-Men Apocalypse.
Actually, not true.
Now, are you talking about the comics or are you talking about the movies?
I'm talking about in the comic books.
Okay, well, then that's different.
Hang on a moment. It's okay. As the comic books expand a little bit and create the origin stories for everybody involved, then you get to a specific point in the movie where in the movies, everything before Apocalypse, which we're not going to talk about today, everyone gets a little bit of origin information, except Storm.
Now, in the comics, where they do introduce Storm, they meet her when she's where she's being worshipped as a goddess by the African tribe.
That's a portion of her origin story, which doesn't transfer to the movies. Are you telling me they didn't want a black woman thought of as a goddess in film?
I don't think that this had anything to do. I did not think that this was a black thing or whatever.
I didn't say that. I said a goddess because everyone else gets an origin story.
No, Cyclops didn't have his origin story in there. They had a little bit.
They gave you a recap of how he began.
Not in the first X-Men movie.
Yes, they did.
No, they didn't.
You're right. In the very first one, they did not. But there is a scene where he's in high school and his powers turn on, and then yeah, go ahead. I'm listening.
That was probably a scene that was left on the cutting room floor. You might have gotten that from a director's cut version of it.
Don't make me find it for you. Don't make me spank you with facts.
Dude, I've watched that first movie.
Let me check my encyclopedia. Hold on just a second. That is correct. Sabretooth comes from Scott Summers on the behest of Magneto on the behest of William Stryker and Weapon X, and it does happen in a Wolverine movie. And I will agree to leave the Wolverine movies out of this as well, okay?
All right. And then, just for the audience's sake, the only reason why we're not going to be mentioning the Wolverine movies is because I haven't seen them. I was not terribly interested in them when they came out. And the only time I really saw most of any of it was just in passing when a friend had it on the TV. And I was just kind of glancing at it every now and again.
Anyway.
Yeah. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is this, is that first of all, let's talk about the movies. Because we start diverging into the comic books, that's going to be a completely different story, and that's going to take us on a totally different tangent.
But I am still explaining to you that every character, with the exception of two, and these are the two that I do know, with the exception of Colossus and Storm, they are the two characters who don't get an origin introduction at any level that are popular and famous characters for the last 30 years.
Well, for Cyclops, that was a problem that a lot of people had throughout the first three X-Men movies, was just how much they completely screwed over Cyclops' character. They didn't. James Marsden really was treated badly for this when it came to his character. His character seemed to have no personality, no
toast.
Yeah, he had all the personality of aluminum siding, and to add insult to injury, they just flat out killed him in X3. Even though they tried to make it, look, bittersweetly, heart-wrenchingly romantic in a twisted sort of way, because Jean, because she couldn't control the Phoenix power in her, ended up killing him. But this lends to what I was trying to say in the very beginning, which you weren't letting me get to my point. Was that
because you were taking forever and you talked too long.
But
you just talk.
Well, I was going to give you a chance. I was almost done. I was going to give you excuse me. What I was trying to get at is this. One of the shortcomings that has plagued the movies from movie one is that they have not, except maybe with the exception of Days of Future Past, they put in a lot of characters and were not able to juggle those characters in a balanced manner. I'm not just talking about origin stories. I mean, you could have a character there and not give their origin story and maybe go back to them at a later movie and do something about that character's origin. But for the first three movies, for instance, they ended up becoming the Wolverine and Storm movies.
They didn't.
What?
They became the Wolverine movies.
Oh, no, they gave Storm a much bigger part in X3 and in X2. But they were mostly the focal characters. Well, Famke Janssen, of course, with Jean Grey. But even her character was kind of cut short in the third movie, which should have been all about the Phoenix Saga, which in a sense it was, but not quite the way that people remember it. But that's another story for another time. But the fact of the matter is that, yeah, I mean, they focus so heavily only on a tiny handful of characters and just kind of made all these other X-Men characters just there. You know, what can you say about what can you say about this character in this movie aside from he exists? He exists. God dang it! You know, that's what you want. It's the only way you can even go. I mean, think about X3 Leech, who was supposed to be the linchpin of what was going on in X3 because he was a mutant that could absorb the power, neutralize, the powers of other mutants. And all he was this silent kid who never said anything.
But watch this. Even through symbolism, they explained to you who the character was and gave you his origin.
But all he was just a silent kid in a white room.
But even doing so, they gave you a little bit of a detail about it. It wasn't clear cut to those of us who know the story, but it was clear cut for those of us who understood how to listen and watch a movie.
I'm sorry, I kind of have to disagree with that. With Leech's character, yeah, they did explain what his purpose was in action rather than word in some regards, but otherwise he was a very two-dimensional character. The same as like when they in X3 when they introduced Multiple Man and the Juggernaut. I mean, the only time that the Juggernaut got any screenplay was when he was fighting Shadowcat, and that was the only part he goes on the Juggernaut pitch because that was the from that silly internet meme. You know, that's about it. Multiple Man, well, he was pretty interesting because he could make multiples of himself, but that was pretty much all he had going for him. Nothing else. I don't think he ever said a single word. Even Mystique in the third movie was relegated to being on Magneto's arm most of the time, and he threw her to the curb when her powers were shut off.
Well, now see, you have been watching. There you go. There's a good step in the right direction. But we're also kind of beating up here. One of the things that I would like to do is to take a moment and look at the combination of Brett Ratner and Bryan Singer and kind of bring this conversation a little bit together. And I'm not going to be overly technical about this. In fact, I'm going to be pretty street-based about it. Okay, the very first X-Men movie was 16 years ago in 2000. Okay? It's taken them 16 years to give us credible storytelling and to move it forward. But let's deal with the first three movies. Fair enough?
Well, I'd like to say something about you saying it took them 16 years to give us credible storytelling. I felt that the first X-Men movie, actually the first and second ones, had very good storytelling.
Okay, let's talk about the first three movies.
Okay, let's do
make
that.
It fair. Let's knock down number one. And here, I'm looking, but I want to ask you a question. Without looking at it, would you say that the storyline was clear and easy to follow?
In the movies that followed, what you mean
No. The very first movie was the story. From a writer's standpoint, we're both writers. Was the story easy to follow?
Yes, I thought it was easy to follow.
Oh, okay, and that's cool. And I'm not going to quite disagree with that. And no, actually, let me not be a waffler. I'm going to agree that the story was easy to follow. In your opinion, could you have written a better story?
With every movie I watch, I probably could.
Probably. Not likely. In this case, could you have outwritten Singer on this?
I've what?
Could you have outwritten Bryan Singer on this story?
Well, I don't think Singer probably was involved in the script writing process. Probably so.
Okay. I agree with you. A 12-year-old could have written the first movie differently. Better? I'm not sure. Because I don't even think I potentially could have written it better.
Well, admittedly, I do have to at least say this. There was a lot of worry in Hollywood, not just to the fact that they were doing a superhero movie, because X-Men came out. X-Men was it wasn't the first, but it really was when superhero movies were starting to be taken seriously. Really, Blade has the honor of turning things around. But X-Men wasn't too long after Blade, and what the worry that people had, because the movie had actually been knocked around Hollywood since the 80s, was that how could they make a movie that has such a large cast and a dynamic team into something that could be comprehensible, and still be to have a strong script and everything like that, and strong characterization within the span of just a 90 or a little slightly more minute movie.
Do you mean a large cast superhero movie or a large cast movie?
Well, a large cast superhero movie, because that had never been tried before. Well, actually, it had, and it was not pretty. Look up the Harvey Korman Fantastic Four movie if you dare.
No, that movie was all of the things that it was, simply to fulfill a contract goal. We simply excused that movie directly off the bat.
Well, there's been others. There was also a Justice League movie that was also god awful.
Actually, for a TV movie, the story was not bad.
The Green Lantern came flying on a propeller like Inspector Gadget. Don't even get me started.
They didn't. If you watch this, you're applying special effects failures to storytelling.
It wasn't just that. It was also it was terrible costume design, and really it was too campy. It was like somebody was trying to make a superhero movie into a sitcom. And then the Martian Manhunter looked like he ate the men he hunted.
But you also have to realize that came along at a time when a TV show called The Greatest American Hero was #1 on TV.
No, that Justice League movie came out long after Greatest American Hero.
All right. Let me help you learn something. The name of the movie is called Star-Crossed. And it is the Justice League movie. And Star-Crossed, the Justice League movie, is designed to seriously be a TV movie and nothing more. It can't be anything more. It just would not work as anything else. And it was done on a shoestring budget, and it was an attempt to get the product out there. And in fact, it was a failed TV episode. I kind of want to back away from that and get back onto the X-Men, because you made a statement that kind of rings a little bit true. Large cast movies have been made since the 1950s, where a bunch of people who are all buddies, friends, get together and star in this movie, and it's this madcap comedy, and we all run down the road and we run to the bank and cash our checks to pay our taxes. That's what those movies are renowned for. That's why you get It's a Mad, Mad World. That's why you get The Great Race starring Tony Curtis. And there are a few others that are very popular. The last one that I saw starred Whoopi Goldberg and Rowan Atkinson, if you can imagine the two of them in a movie together. And John Cleese was in it. But nonetheless, it's not what we're talking about. Large cast dramatic movies normally don't work. But the first one that did work was the first one that worked correctly was the new remake of Ocean's 11 that came out in 2001. So that tells me that in Hollywood in 1998, 99, people were sitting around snorting coke and drinking mimosas and going, what if we could get all these actors in one place at the same time? And then they applied that same formula to give you what became X-Men. And I do agree. The story wasn't as bad as it could have been, but they also picked the right core of actors to show up correctly. It wasn't actors who were so unknown that you were going, who is that? And they weren't actors that were so overly known that you were going, how come that person didn't get a lot of screen time? Even though these statements were made about what was cut of Halle Berry in movie one and what was cut out of Rebecca Romijn, or what Rebecca Romijn didn't have to wear. I mean, quite honestly, Bruce Davison as Senator Kelly got more screen time than Halle Berry did in the first movie.
Yeah. And well, of course, we know Halle Berry actually got upset about that, and that was the reason why they gave her a bigger part in the second and third movies.
Right now we're on the first movie because there's more detail about the second movie as well.
Right, but
but now that you broached the subject, I don't think that she got a bigger part because she complained about it. She got paid the same amount of money if she had no time on camera as opposed to a lot of time on camera. She got paid the same amount of money. The majority of her scenes in one are cut. Period. So I want to step away from that and focus on the story, the film itself. It worked out really well for us. We enjoyed it. Do you agree? Yeah, I know we got limited time. You just gotta say, so what you want to know? I'll go a little bit over. You don't want to spend 20 minutes talking about I'm gonna talk about.
Well, I'm kind of jumping around talking about specifics on the various movies, but you know, the whole deal with Halle Berry, you know, does reflect, like I said, one of the glaring problems that all the movies seem to have, even the better ones, like the first and second movie, and maybe Days of Future Past, is that not so much Days of Future Past, really, maybe First Class, but I have to go back and look at that one.
That's why we're doing them in order. That's why we've now moved up to the second movie, which introduces Nightcrawler into the story. But we're still dealing with Bryan Singer.
Well, yeah, that one, like I said, everybody considers X2 to be the best one out, at least the first go round, and really it did, because they tightened the focus of the story to the X-Men much more closely.
Actually, they tightened the focus to telling a story.
Well, like I said, I think they told a story in the first one, and that focus on that one was pretty tight, but it sacrificed certain aspects of character development.
The first story was Magneto's going to do what at the Statue of Liberty, and then do what?
Right.
Can you actually remember all that?
For a first movie in a planned series, or at least trilogy, the focus of the plot tends to be a relatively simple thing.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean you gotta like it, and it doesn't mean you gotta take it.
Well, yeah, I mean, there are movies that probably break the mold, and if I thought about it for a moment,
and they had an opportunity to break the mold here, and they didn't.
I think that it would have been very dangerous to try to do that, because working with a franchise like X-Men, which thrives on the richness of its diverse cast, along with having a good tale to tell. But when you look back at how the stories go in X-Men, those tales sometimes take a long time to tell and are very involved. Not something you can squeeze into a 90 or slightly more minute movie. So that was what they were trying to do for the first X-Men. Keep it relative.
You're such a Hollywood apologist. Stop doing that.
No, I'm not a Hollywood apologist.
Yeah, you are.
You
just explained away why you can't get a better movie.
And am I wrong?
Yeah, you can get a better movie.
You know, I'd love to discuss that with you in depth, but let's just keep to the main subject at hand for now.
Well, hence why you think I'm on the second movie, which is a better story, more involved, more fleshed out characters.
And I do agree. I don't have a lot of complaints about the second movie at all. It did a great job with expanding things from the first movie. It had a much tighter focus. It had a much more interesting. It had a much more interesting cast of characters. You know, even the ones that didn't get a lot of screen time had, shall we say, enough of a focus to how do I want to put this? Had enough of a focus to give them, you know, a bit of depth to.
Well, here, let's kind of beat this up for real and not throw barbs at one another. Here, the introduction in the movie 2, the introduction of Kurt Wagner, Brian Cox as William Stryker. Good job. Really, really good job. We get an expansion up on Pyro's character, which is Aaron Stanford. We begin to understand Kelly Hu as Lady Deathstrike. These things begin to take form, and those are the newly introduced characters in the movie 2. And even those characters, for us who are fans, are more fleshed out than the original movie. That's my opinion. Do you agree?
Absolutely. I do agree. Okay. Those characters are much more fleshed out. They had a more complex plot, with higher stakes, and it ended with a hell of a cliffhanger. So you know, it set up things for what we thought was going to be a really grand, at least finale to a trilogy. And then we got X3.
It's kind of like Bryan Singer pulled his head out of his butt, and it was too late. And then we get Brett Ratner. Now,
well, what happened? There's an interesting story to that. What happened was that Fox, if you remember, there was a big gap between the second and third movie. Forget how many years, it was like 3 or 4 years. And what happened was Bryan Singer was all hard up to go ahead and get the next movie rolling. Fox sat on their hands. The Fox execs sat on their hands. Finally, what happened was Warner Brothers offered Singer. Sorry, I don't keep on seeing it. If I said Brent Ratner earlier, I meant Singer. Anyway, Singer was hard up to do the next movie. Fox was sitting on their hands. Then Warner Brothers offered Singer the chance to direct Superman Returns, which he jumped at. And then finally, Fox was like, "Oh, we're going to start the movie. Come back." Too late.
Well, actually, you're looking at this out of sequence. I understand where you're coming from. The movie, the way it came out. Yes, you're correct, and I do agree with you that is ultimately what happened. But in the meantime, our buddy Bryan Singer was off doing other things, and more specifically, he was dealing with sitting at home twiddling his thumbs, getting bitched at because he didn't turn out what everyone wanted with that. And so therefore he did House in between there as a director. As a producer, Bryan Singer went out and did not First Class, that's later. He did something called The Triangle, which is another TV show, and it was a TV miniseries. Now, in the time that X2 wrapped and they did all the marketing for it, he had to go do something else. And while waiting on that, yeah, Superman did pop up, and then he went and did it. So I do get it. In the same time period, so that we can just be bang on and really true to ourselves. Our buddy Brett Ratner, what was he doing? He was looking at a movie called Red Dragon, which is actually good. It's a remake, but a prequel to the Hannibal Lecter story. Mm-hmm. And then, something called After Sunset, and then he did Prison Break before he came to X-Men Last Stand. And that's his trajectory. So they both got to these points by accident. But the accident worked out kind of well. I think that X3 was a bit bungled. And I think that you're looking at actors who were tired of the characters and wanted more control. But I also feel you're looking at a studio who wasn't sure what they had on their hands at the same time, too. Your thoughts?
I don't know that. I really think that Fox knew what they had on their hands. I just think that they were sitting on those hands for way too long.
I can't agree with you there. In here, this is where we are in agreement on X3, that there was a lot of love, of hand-holding engaged here. And yeah, I did like the Juggernaut, the introduction of Juggernaut. I also like the
Juggernauts, and that thing kind of upset me. Is like, just to squeeze a Juggernaut in there, because they were trying to avoid the whole magical enemies and stuff, I guess. And so they made the Juggernaut a mutant rather than being an embodiment of Sidorak, which is what it was in the comic.
Which would have been confusing to anyone who is not in the X-Men story all the way. And you're correct. And we also didn't get the Starjammers at all, and we never should. But I don't want to dive into that from a movie perspective. But I was pleased that we did get Callisto. We did get
multiple man. They did have Callisto.
We did get multiple man. So we did get a lot of characters that we needed to see to round out some of the things.
I don't know. To me, it felt like they were just fulfilling a quota. I mean, the Morlocks at least did play a significant role in the movie, but they really didn't focus on any one of them at all, except Callisto, and for a very brief period of time.
And not directly, not by title, name, or fleshing out the character completely. And yeah, we're both correct here, and we both agree here. But there's Psylocke, there's the Lizard Man, and yeah, the entire Morlock storyline, which is really important to us. And it's like one of the things that I was really displeased with about 3 altogether. Oh my goodness. Come on. Talk about drawing a blank.
Which character are you talking about? Can you describe him?
The doctor in
Dr. Moira McTaggart?
No. The doctor in the clinic.
Oh, I don't remember his name.
No, not him. It's the woman. Here, give me just a moment so that I don't burn too much of your time. I'll give you a direct response and a direct answer, okay?
All right.
Like a heartbeat. I have so much sci-fi in my head, and it sometimes takes a heart. There we go. This will come up, and the reason that I cannot say this woman's name directly is because I have a very tough time with Iranian names. Shareh, and dude, I just cannot say this girl's name. She's not a girl, she's a woman. But here, I'll share her face to the screen, and I don't care who says anything about it because I think she's a very cool actress. I think she has one of the most interesting voices. And she's in X3. And
Sorry, Dr. Bachelor. Okay.
Yeah, I don't do well Iranian names, but her voice is so distinctive. And when you hear it, you know whom you're speaking to and about. And she had no speaking parts in X3. What a waste. What a waste of an actress. Now, I'm pretty sure there's a snippet of her having a speaking part on there. And that's what I couldn't think of. She plays a bureaucrat in Christian Avascaro in The Expanse.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Awesome
she is in
job
The Expanse.
She
Forgot
does
about
an
that.
awesome job in it.
I've only seen like the first episode. I've been meaning to watch the whole first season, and I just keep pushing it back. But
tell you what, in about 3 weeks from now, we'll talk about The Expanse and we'll beat it the hell up. But right now, we're on to we got past Bryan Singer.
Okay, well, what I was trying to say about for X3 is just, to me, it felt like they were putting in characters just to put them in there. You know, I mean, yeah, they had some pretty cool moments with some of those characters, but in the end of the day, they were just there. And so once again, the whole overcasting thing reared its ugly head. And
it's a nod to the entire character base that makes up the mutant world. And
I know. They even in the animated series, they did that sometimes. You'd see a character, you knew who he or she was, even though they never mentioned him by name. So,
yeah.
You know.
And here, I go along with that as well. And then we're presented with, in watching the films in sequence, which do you feel came first, Days of Future Past or First Class?
Well, sequentially and temporally, First Class is first, because Days of Future Past, though it begins in like what was it, 2030? It's supposed to focus on the 19th.
Which one came out first for you? That's all I ask.
Of course, First Class came out before that one.
Okay, and that's cool. That's the conversation we're having next. We're going to talk about First Class.
No, the interesting thing was, it surprised me that when they did when they announced the new X-Men movie, that they were going to be just going back in time and started showing how everything began, because I was at first kind of not really digging that until I learned that, and I didn't go see the movie, and I actually watched it after it came out on DVD. And I was really kind of kicking myself for not having watched it, because everybody was talking about how good it was. And I decided to finally watch it. I was like, wow, this is really, really good. They did a great job with the casting, picking, oh, good grief. What's the name of the dude who plays Professor X? I can't remember his name right off the top of my head. Second. Oh, Lord. That was James McAvoy. using James McAvoy as Professor X and Michael Fassbender as Magneto. That really amazed me how well they did, and how they how how they put together the story of how he and Professor X and Magneto met and how they became friends, and then what happened to cause the rift between them, and played it out so well in the movie. And not only that, but once again, kind of keeping the focus. I mean, it's still some characters did fall to the knife of time constraints, so some didn't get as much of a development as I'd hoped that they would, though in my humble opinion they kind of more than made up for it with just how spectacular they were able to do the effects for their powers, which kind of spoke more volumes than they really said. I mean, the only one that I feel really I wish they had built up a bit more was the White Queen. Then and the interesting thing is they borrowed the White Queen's alternate power from much later in the X-Men comics. The White Queen.
But once again, right there, you're diving down that rabbit hole again to going what they did or didn't do. And I kind of want to go with you because I want to kind of beat that up. But step back and answer a simple question. In the stream of the storytelling, you have 1, 2, 3, First Class. Do you feel that the cliffhanger of 3 establishes a great opportunity for storytelling in First Class?
No, I felt that looking back on it, I think that they were right to reboot the franchise because X3 really, they basically painted themselves into a corner.
But also, we're also willing to buy into BS when we go, they rebooted the program and it's wonderful.
Well, let's get to that when we get to Days of Future Past, because with the case of X3, with Professor, they killed off Cyclops, they killed Jean Grey, and they killed Professor X. And the only thing was at the end where they had the guy who was a vegetable in Moira McTaggart's office, and he wakes up and at the after credits thing says, "Hello, Moira," and he's speaking in the professor's voice. That's interesting and all, but I just don't really know.
Is there any kids in the audience? Cover your ears. Yeah, that's a true jack-off scene.
Huh?
Don't worry about it. You're not old enough to hear it twice. It's just one of those things that could have been left alone. It was unnecessary, and we could have just left the movie where it fell.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole deal. Is just I didn't like. I mean, okay, the theme of the third movie with that whole things finally just blew up to outright war. There are going to be losses. So if they may have left it at that, on a sense, on one side, I guess that could be understandable, but
come on, quit being mamby-pamby. Come down where you mean to come down at.
I'm telling you exactly how I feel. So as I was trying to say, well, hey, you can feel that way if you want, but that's how I feel. What I'm saying is on an intellectual level, I could see where that could be understandable. But as a fan of the comics, I felt that they kind of screwed a lot of the characters in X3, that they overdid the death toll.
Well, I think that First Class was a great establishment. I don't want to think of it as a reboot. I look at it as just the next story in the storytelling.
I don't think of First Class really as a reboot at all. I really think that they were going for starting things from a fresher perspective.
So like you said, you agree with me. You understand that I'm right and you're not. I mean, that you agree with me because I am right.
No, I said I don't see it as a reboot.
And neither do I. We agree on that.
I'm sorry. I thought you said you saw it as a reboot. My bad.
No, it's not. It's just the next story in the storytelling. It makes sense. It's direct. It gives you this very wonderful point of view. It gives you this magnificent, colossal storytelling, and we get bigger than life storytelling, which is what I like from comic book stories. And I also like the fact that they have held the X-Men separate from the other interlaced Marvel universe, contractually or whatever. If you ever realized, even in the comic books, It's a rare day when the rest of the Marvel universe crosses into the X-Men territory. It's just the way it happens, and I like that.
Well, like I said, the only issue I really had with First Class was it's once again sacrificing some characters for getting the plot moving. But that was but
Yeah,
it,
that
but
was.
it had a much smaller number of characters that it had to kind of throw by the wayside.
But
And really none of them except for maybe Darwin, the one who could alter his form to adapt to any environment. But he was the only one who when they killed him, I was like, man, that dude had so much potential. And the only other one aside from him was probably the White Queen.
stop for a moment. Take a deep breath. Breathe. Continue speaking.
I'm breathing just fine, dude. Anyway.
Yeah, you could fool us. But even there, inside of X-Men First Class, you're correct. They didn't allow you time to find an emotional connection to the characters that they did away with. So you didn't feel too bad, and these characters appeared to only be created to be done away with. Because there's no mention of them anywhere else in the Marvel lexicon by those names and by those specific set of powers in that specific way. So yeah, I understand that one. So
Okay.
now we fast forwarded all the way to Days of Future Past.
Now that one I think was also one of the better X-Men movies. Just in the fact that they kept everything compact. They didn't branch things out to have 1,000,001 characters, 1,000,001 different mutants. They kept the focus very tight. The only time you ever saw any characters that, though they did things, they didn't really expand on them, was maybe 2 characters I wish they had, was Bishop and Blink. Because, well, even in the comics, Blink died at a very early point in the Phalanx Covenant. They still that one.
Tell everybody that. Here is something about X-Men Days of Future Past that I want you to be aware of. There is sequences with Anna Paquin in it, and the movie runs roughly, I think, 2 hours and 11 minutes long, 2 hours and 10 minutes long. The director's cut version of it runs 2:29. Just so for you to be aware, there's an additional 20 minutes of footage out there that kind of assist with the storytelling, but not the final outcome of the story.
Well, right. Well, I actually, when I was in the movies, I actually saw, at the end, they actually showed Anna Paquin in that one. She had a very, very brief moment as Rogue. But what I'm trying to say about X3, God, Days of Future Past is that despite the fact that a couple of characters did have to get sacrificed to the whole god of, brevity, yeah, it was a great movie with a really intriguing story. I mean, the only other thing that kind of bothered me was that they used Shadowcat to send Wolverine back in time. And, Shadowcat, even in the comics, never had that ability. They just kind of pulled something out of their backsides for that part.
But watch this. Ellen Page, she's a wonderful, darling little Canadian girl. She's the best lesbian of the year. Let's give her an expanded role. Skip what the actual story says. It's okay.
In the end of the day, it's not that big of a deal. It's just something it's just something that irked me a little.
You kind of didn't hear the humor in that? For one, you're correct. The character didn't have those powers to be able to do that. In fact, in the original, here, let me check my Marvel encyclopedia to get an answer. Hold on, just a minute.
Mystique's friend Destiny, she was a blind seer. She could send people in the past or something like that.
No. I'm going to ask my encyclopedia a question. Hang on just a second.
Oh wait, it wasn't Destiny. Never mind.
Now, after checking my encyclopedia for the detailed facts, the reason that Kitty Pryde sends Wolverine back to the past in X-Men Days of Future Past is because it does become a future power of the character.
Yeah, okay. And that's another issue, is one mutant has their powers evolved to something else. And yes, I know that's happened in the comics, but I mean, in all the movies, they wait until now to do something like that. That's a bit jarring for people who are not fans of the comics, but who know what these folks are if they've read some of the fluff.
But watch this. Your entire argument about the first 3 movies was based upon the comic books, too. Stop it. You can't be on both sides of the equator. You got to pick one and stay on it.
It says who?
Well, then you argue like a little kid.
I'm not arguing. I'm just saying.
I'm telling you, you're arguing. I want you to argue. But no, here. I think that let's kind of pull Ellen Page out for a moment and really kind of look at her. For a mainstream movie viewer, there are 3 places you've seen her. There's a film called Hard Candy. There is a film called Inception. And then there are the X-Men movies. So for mainstream viewing, that's where you've seen her. And unless you're in the know and kind of understand that Ellen Page is not a little kid anymore, that she has always played youthful. And she will always play youthful and small until it no longer benefits her. And then, no, she won't become Betty White. She'll become Hetty from NCIS Los Angeles.
Well, all that aside, the Days of Future Past just did a great job of what it was given. I mean, one of the movie's few shortcomings, which I could say is, and I kind of have to agree with critics on this one, is that Peter Dinklage just did not do a very... I mean, he was okay as...
He nailed in his performance.
Huh?
He nailed in his performance.
Kind of.
He literally walked through it a little short.
No, don't.
I couldn't resist.
I like Peter Dinklage. Don't.
I do too. But here, his best movie to me is a movie called In Bruges, which it's a really dark comedy in a host of ways that you have to watch it to get it. And it's about alcohol, it's about murder, and it's a comedy. So we'll leave it at that. In the city of Bruges. And I can't even tell you where Bruges is, but nobody goes to Bruges. It's nice, it's quiet, it's Bruges.
Well,
it is.
Well, like I said, Peter Dinklage, coming up a little short as the villain, no pun intended. That plus,
you can make the jokes and I
can't. A few of the character sacrifice, like I said, to the god of brevity. There's very little that was not to like about this movie. I mean, Wolverine, once again took center stage, but they didn't shove him in your face. He actually worked really well in the role that was given, despite the fact that anyone who's read the comic knows that Shadowcat was sent back in time. However, the part of Days of Future Past that hit it out of the ballpark was the end. When Wolverine wakes up in that room and it's back to the same, year, but everything is totally different. The world is peaceful. The whole world has not gone to hell, this kind of stuff. And then you realize when you see all the characters from the original movies, in there, you realize X3 was completely erased.
Yes.
They did away with X3. That was amazing. X3 never happened.
That's good and bad storytelling at the same time, but if you are a series reader of serial comic books, you understand how that works and why it works. But both you and I as writers in mature storytelling and as critics understand that was a cheap way out. But we're willing to forgive it as comic book fans.
I don't think that was cheap at all. I think that was a stroke of genius.
Come on, man. I'm going to take you to task about writing now.
I would say, look, the reason why I call it a stroke of genius is because as a writer, I know that kind of a plot twist is extremely dangerous to use and very ill-advised unless you really, really, really know what the hell you're doing.
But You're telling me that it's okay to say it was just a dream?
No, but that's the whole deal. It doesn't amount to it was just a dream. It is completely different. This is a thing involving time travel to where a particular timeline never happened. And
okay, we're talking paradox at this point.
Or paradox avoidance.
Well, yeah, it still functions as a paradox.
Okay, no, I could get into Marvel's fast and loose playing of physics to actually explain why there wasn't a paradox.
Marvel playing with
but
physics.
I'm not about to go into that because that's just gonna make my head hurt. But
Marvel playing with physics.
I said they're playing fast and loose with physics.
You just made a company that made their money 12 cents at a time from writing stories and on 32 pages out to be the time travel lords of storytelling.
And that's the reason why I said I'm not going to go into that, because it's going to give me a
Do
headache.
you live on the second floor?
What?
Do you live on the second floor?
Not anymore.
I was going to tell you go defenestrate yourself.
I wouldn't die from a dive off the second floor.
No, but you break your ankles and you'd have something to talk about.
Anyway.
Above Marvel and physics in the same sentence.
Anyway, I mean, it to me that plot twist was a stroke of genius, because it completely erased a movie that most people consider to be a cinematic abortion. Personally, I didn't hate X3, but I really was disappointed with it.
I would say overall that I wasn't happy with the X3, and you are correct. Days of Future Past did kind of make it up. And I want to say that as a fan of the storytelling, and I remember to this day going out and purchasing Giant Size #1. And I was so excited to see on the cover of Giant Size #1 a African-American person in the form of Storm. I just couldn't figure out why she had white hair. So that was an intrigue to me alone. And then the guy with X-ray beams coming out of his eyes. I was so excited to see that cover of that book. And it turned me into a lifelong fan of the X-Men storytelling. And I stuck with X-Men all the way through the original run up to 210. And life, amongst other things, pulled me away from it. I was very satisfied and happy to see it show up in movies and film. And when it showed up in movies and film, I think that I got the best portion of storytelling overall. What about yourself?
When it came to the comics?
The whole storytelling process, not just the comics, but also
for me, the movies, were sort of a dream come true, because I never once thought that they would actually make an X-Men movie, simply because the cast was so large. And of course, this was in a time where Hollywood was still kind of about doing comic book movies. Like I said in the beginning of the whole broadcast, is that all we had was the Wizard magazines and the casting call sections, and pretty much it was just a "wouldn't it be cool if" kind of thing.
And I do concur with that.
Of course, up at that time, a lot of comic book movies that they had been coming out with were kind of crap. Like I said, the first breakthrough one was Blade, and it kind of gave Hollywood the courage to start making a few more. And this time start giving it to directors that that at least respected the source material. And
now here, I'm not going to disagree with you or kind of beat this up. Are you saying that Marvel's first big breakout movie is Blade, or the superhero genre took off with Blade?
The superhero genre was taken more seriously with the success of Blade.
I would think Batman with Michael Keaton.
Even after the first Batman movie, those Batman movies were done they were a bit more style over substance. The Blade was kind of a combination of both.
I would say the Blade did give you the drama and the storytelling and all the good stuff that goes along with a good comic book story. I do feel that other areas, excuse me just a moment, I got distracted by something. Brandon, I apologize to you for breaking away like that. And let me be more linear in my thoughts and my statement. I do concur that Blade did bring a certain level of drama and sensational storytelling to the comic book genre. I do still see, for me, in dissecting across a wide range of films, as Michael Keaton as Batman being a breakthrough. And it's kind of odd because as I look over my shoulder into the past, I see the first Star Wars movie, A New Hope, the first Superman movie with Christopher Reeve, and the Michael Keaton Batman. I see the three of those movies as setting the stage for there being able to be a X-Men film or an Iron Man film or a larger expanded space within that fantasy realm that we are so commonplace to see today. And that takes a longer and more introspective story, and it takes a more technical look at exactly what does it take to bring sensationalism to the screen. And I don't want to get into speaking about Marvel wants you to consider it the new mythological hero storytelling house. I think that's a marketing tool.
Well, okay, like I said, I still think that, with X-Men, that was the first like real hefty, aside from maybe the Batman movies, the real hefty push that really brought comic book movies into the forefront as something that was really, really, really marketable and could be done really well in a way that mixed style and substance.
Because and there are many failures to pull out and look at.
So many. Yes.
And when we say quote unquote comic, I am including comic strips, what I refer to as comic books, previously funny books, comics, and graphic novels. For me, a comic book hasn't been funny since 1965. So using that terminology always fails upon me. Even though I am a great fan of The Watchmen as a whole, I really am not going to tell you that it's a great film. It's a great storytelling attempt, and it used every panel of the graphic novel as well as the original 12 issues to tell the story, but it missed a whole lot in being able to be a theatrical release. And we will always come back to that as a point of conversation. So that's getting into the tech head, but as a fan, what comic or comic strip movies have I not liked? I like that my encyclopedia said Garfield. Garfield, Marmaduke. Had they made a Heathcliff movie?
Oh, good God. I think they're making a Heathcliff movie, if memory serves.
I would like to see a Family Circus movie.
It needs to be live action, and it needs to really be, be in the spirit in which and how the comic was made.
Hey, listen, it's that time. I want you to begin to wrap up and sign out because I got a phone call to answer, and I'll be right back with you while I take this call.
Okay, well, everyone, Hope this shows how we feel about the X-Men movies up to date. Next week we will be talking about X-Men Apocalypse, the most recent addition into the X-Men family. We were kind of coy about that for a very good reason. Once again, if you would like to keep up with us, you can keep up with us on my channel on YouTube, which is Deck Crash. That's DECKRASH. Also on Thinking Cave, TC's channel. That's TC space Thinking Caveman. Also, as always, if you want to keep up with me on my Facebook group, which is author Brandon Hill, you can keep up with the information about my artwork and my newest books and reviews, and also my 2 DeviantArt pages, Brandon Hill and Wild Space Saga. The latter, of course, talks about my webcomic. Now, enough of my self-aggrandizement here. Thank you all for tuning in, those who have. And for those of you who are listening even just to the recorded broadcast, thank you once again for listening in. I hope this will give you some fuel to start listening a little bit more. And so this is it for us here on our end. Thank you all for listening. Once again, comment, rate, subscribe. As always, keep it civil. And once again, this is Dak Crash, better known as Brandon. And as always, stay lucky and stay blessed. Take care.
And this is how I would sign up. Hey, thanks for listening. Tell your friends. Listen next time. I got to go.